The dynamic of our relationship, 30F and 32F, has changed overnight, and my partner refuses to acknowledge it. Is she gaslighting me? We have been together for 9 years. We met in college and have endured many stressful times, including the death of a parent, financial difficulties, unemployment, relocating to a new town, returning to school, traveling for family, the death of a pet, excessive drinking, and ultimately getting sober together. There have been moments when our communication was lacking, or we found ourselves in insecure, toxic situations. We have invested a considerable amount of effort into healing and addressing our issues over the years. If you had asked me 2 months ago, I would have said our partnership was stronger than ever. Today, however, I am questioning whether I need to move out. The most significant context is that we live in a very small one-bedroom apartment that honestly resembles a studio with an extra wall. We have done a lot to make it appealing, cozy, and feel like home. There is a community garden that I tend to, trails right outside the back door, and the grocery store is just a block away for easy walking access. However, the apartment itself is quite cramped. For the last several years, I have worked in food service jobs while completing graduate school and enduring the long, arduous process of job searching. About 6 months ago, I finally secured a decent work-from-home position that I genuinely enjoy. My partner has held a work-from-home job for the past 2 years. It was very challenging for me while I worked food service hours, as I was often away on nights and weekends, meaning we hardly saw each other. She had significantly more alone time, while I grew accustomed to having none since she was always at home. The first few months after I started my new job felt like a dream. It was amazing to have an entire weekend off and to be home on a Thursday night. I finally achieved consistent sleep and began to heal from the stress of the previous years. My partner welcomed this change enthusiastically, and we enjoyed a few months of complete sexual and emotional happiness, feeling deeply connected and as if our lives were coming together significantly. I would ask if she needed more time alone, and we agreed that it was always acceptable to need space, especially since we were both working from home. She assured me repeatedly that she was thrilled to have me home and would laugh about how she never got tired of my company. We live in the United States, and of course, a month ago was Inauguration Day. I do not need to explain what a chaotic and exhausting situation it has been. The shift in political events significantly altered my partner's behavior. Understandably, she became glued to the news, and for the first few days as events unfolded, she would rant and comment on everything with anger, indignation, and disbelief. I was right there with her, but we respond to stress in different ways. She needs to express her thoughts about issues in order to process them, while I tend to shut down and feel anxious. We argued about limiting political discussions, which was essentially me establishing a boundary that I could not endure any more political conversations, and her reacting negatively to it. This led to my struggle to handle her upset because I despise tension in our home. She eventually spoke to her therapist about the conflict, who recommended timing rules for discussing politics. She suggested that we establish 15 30-minute limits during which I could express my capacity to engage with political topics, allowing my partner to know how long she could vent while respecting my boundaries. A few days later, we attempted this timing rule, and it resulted in a massive, unprecedented fight that felt unlike anything that had occurred between us for years. The argument continued into the next morning and night, and I slept on the couch for 2 nights. We reached an impasse regarding the issue of being upset in the first place. She wants me to assert my boundaries, while I desire her not to be upset with me when I do, as it makes it more difficult for me to speak up. She cannot promise to refrain from getting upset when I assert boundaries. She wants me to simply accept her being upset with me. Ironically, my inability to handle tension and anger in the household has become part of the problem. We concluded with her encouraging me to work on myself to avoid provoking fights like that in the future. Deep down, I do not feel as though we ever truly reconciled. In the past, after a significant argument, we usually took some time apart to calm down, then came back together for some tender, loving care. We both took some alone time after this fight, yet we have not reunited meaningfully. However, my partner insists that everything is good and fine. Almost defensively, she refuses to show any emotional vulnerability to me. She keeps asserting that she feels great, confident, strong, and secure. When I have tried to discuss my insecurities about our relationship, she redirects the conversation to my supposed insecurity with myself, claiming that my low self-esteem is the source of tension between us. At the same time, she has distanced herself physically, not only in terms of a lack of sex, but as if she cannot tolerate being in the same room as me. She often locks herself in the bedroom for hours on end, sometimes 5 to 6 hours, where she scrolls through social media and engages in solitary activities. She has stopped touching me, and the only sexual encounter we have had in the last month felt devoid of intimacy. It seems as if all softness and romance within her has disappeared. Every day feels like a confrontation brewing just beneath the surface, and anything can trigger her anger. Her mind appears to be elsewhere, and it seems as if she is annoyed by my very presence in her space. When I mention her change in behavior, she insists she has no idea what I am referring to, and occasionally, when she sees me crying, she becomes angry and asks, "Why are you doing this?" Or, "What's wrong? Why are you acting this way?" For example, yesterday, after both of us finished work, I left for a walk to give her some additional time to decompress. When I returned home, she locked herself in the bedroom to sort clothes. Then we spent about an hour together on the couch for dinner. I gave her a back rub, and afterward, she locked herself in the bathroom for a lengthy bath before encouraging me to have my own alone time. When I explained that I did not particularly need alone time and looked forward to watching a show with her, she labeled me as codependent and unhealthy. So, I retreated to the bedroom, played video games quietly for the next 3 hours, and remained silent. When my partner finally came to bed, she seemed annoyed that I was still awake. Then, she accused me of having wanted her to come in and join, expressing anger over my supposed intrusion into her alone time, despite the fact that I had been alone in the room and had not indicated any such desire. We went to bed upset, and this morning she again acted as if everything was perfectly fine while maintaining an underlying anger that clearly indicates things are not well. We had some tense exchanges when she asked if I had meetings later in the day, and when I began to say, "Yes, from 2 to 4, she interrupted me in frustration, saying, "Ugh, I have to prepare for my own meeting. I cannot listen to this right now." I was merely responding to her question. I feel as though I am losing my mind. I feel hurt, disconnected, and as if I should be contemplating moving out. Everything I say or do seems to trigger her anger. It's bewildering. We were a solid team on January 19, and the following day, she seemed to find my very presence unbearable. The other night, while we lay in bed on opposite sides, I suggested that she might want to snuggle, even a little. She snapped back with a time and place, asserting that it was inappropriate for me to make such a suggestion. She promised that she might give me a hug this weekend. Am I overanalyzing her drastic change in behavior, given the current overwhelming political crisis occurring in the United States? Am I genuinely being insecure and codependent, not respecting her need for space enough? Am I asking too much by expecting our relationship to remain unchanged during this time? And am I truly the source of all our problems due to my inability to cope well with her anger towards me? Story 2. I drove my partner to the hospital after 5 days without sleep. He accused me of using him and tried to give me a notebook. When my partner, 34 male, and I, 34 female, initially became a couple, he informed me that he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He was taking lithium medication at the time, and we did not cohabitate. I also discovered that he is autistic, which I learned after I inquired, in addition to having an anxiety disorder. Fast forward 1 year, we both experienced job losses in a brief period. My job loss was particularly traumatic as I faced harassment there. Throughout my nearly 2 decades in professional corporate management, I had never encountered such disrespect and cruelty. Given these circumstances, I find myself facing a significant mental breakdown. I have a psychiatrist, and I am taking my medication while trying to heal and stabilize as effectively as possible. His job loss was largely self-inflicted because he was struck by someone else operating machinery. However, when questioned about it, he admitted to being under the influence of marijuana daily and did not seem to recognize the implications of that revelation. He only disclosed this crucial detail a few days ago. Consequently, after losing his job, he could no longer afford his first apartment and moved in with me. Over the years, my partner has struggled with several mental health issues, to the extent that his family, friends, and everyone he knows have severed ties with him. Even his twin brother has not communicated with him for 3 years, which deeply upsets him. His job loss also resulted in the loss of his insurance, and when he attempted to sign up for the Affordable Care Act, he was supposedly denied. I didn't press the matter as much as I wanted because, in my younger years, I was overly controlling, and I am working on becoming a gentler and more accepting individual. He has difficulty handling phone calls and paperwork, which I completely understand, as I can also feel overwhelmed. However, it is imperative that we address these responsibilities. In the present day, my partner had not slept for 5 days and was becoming increasingly erratic to the point that I began to doubt my own reality. He accused me of unrealistic and bizarre offenses. He was extremely agitated, pacing, dismantling items, and creating strange messes throughout the house. I felt terrified, desperate, and confused. The situation was triggering for my PTSD, and I became more fearful and anxious with each passing minute. During an argument this morning, he screamed that he would go to the hospital if that was what I wanted. So, I took him up on his offer. It was quite the ordeal to get him to the car, but we managed. I drove him to the emergency room, unsure of where else to take him, and wanting to avoid involving my family or the police. This was due to my desire to prevent my family or anyone else from forming biased judgments against him based solely on this one manic episode. He requested to go to a specific hospital, and I complied. The drive lasted 35 minutes, during which he alternated between waves of excitement, cleaning frantically in the passenger seat, and then crying, telling me, "I don't want to be in trouble." At one point, he removed a paperback notebook from his backpack and offered it to me, saying, "I'm sorry I took this, I just needed something to write with. I don't want to be in trouble." Here. It shattered my heart. I do not care about a mere notebook. No physical possession matters to me more than the well-being of the people I love. He also accused me of using him for free labor and attempting to discard him. Upon arrival at the hospital, it took about 30 minutes to persuade him to enter. During that time, he began rambling about how we have nowhere to go. He claimed we had just sneaked into the place we were currently staying and were going to be discovered and face consequences. I have lived in this house for 10 years, owned by my grandfather, and there is no reason for him to feel insecure or unsafe. At one point, he looked up at me and asked where we were, and when I told him it was the hospital, he inquired if I was okay. I took this chance to express that I was not feeling well and asked if he would go inside with me. I realize this may not have been the most ethical decision, but desperation clouded my judgment. I apologize for rambling. This has been overwhelming. At the hospital, he voluntarily committed himself, and I waited in the lobby since they would not allow me to accompany him during the triage process. I had promised him that I would not abandon him there, and I intended to keep that promise. However, he made wild accusations about me, which also triggered my PTSD and made me feel highly paranoid and unsafe. Nevertheless, I practiced my breathing exercises, took a clonidine, and just tried to cope. He agreed to take medication, and they released him to me. While I was driving to pick up his lithium, he expressed, "I just want to jump out of this car so badly." When I asked why, he replied, "Because I just love being homeless." This statement disturbed me, but I discreetly locked the doors and windows and continued driving. About halfway home, he began to calm down, stating he was tired and even dozed off briefly. He mentioned wanting to take a nap once we arrived home. I felt an overwhelming sense of relief that he was coming down from his episode, and I communicated my happiness about his improved state, noting, "I'm glad you're feeling better. You were saying some very concerning things." I briefly mentioned his claim about us having snuck into my house as squatters, which visibly upset him. I chose to drop the subject and focused on soothing him. I played music he enjoys and attempted to drive as smoothly as possible. Upon arriving home, he jumped in the shower, ate a banana, paced for a bit, and crawled into bed with me. A wave of relief washed over me. Although I remained scared, anxious, and paranoid, I finally felt a sense of comfort. He has now been asleep for about 9 hours. I have managed to sleep an additional 6 hours on top of the 8 I got the previous night because my body felt completely drained. I no longer feel as triggered or scared, but I do worry about what lies ahead. As someone who likes to plan, I know we need to devise a better strategy for preventing or coping with situations like this in the future. Since I fear waking him, I am currently on Reddit instead of leaving this bed. This brings me to seeking advice. What is reasonable for me to request? I want to avoid trying to control him while also preventing him from falling back into a similar state if we can avoid it. I love this man deeply. He is genuinely a good person. He has simply lacked the consistent support someone with his conditions requires. When he is not experiencing manic episodes, he is nurturing and caring. It pains me to realize that so many people have abandoned him due to something that, while serious, is only one aspect of who he is. He is far more than an occasional manic episode. Additionally, my sister lives with me, but we occupy separate floors. This morning, I provided her with a high-level overview of the situation for awareness, without delving into specifics. She is supportive and understands mental health challenges. However, I am cautious not to share so many details that it alters her perception of him. Any advice you can offer beyond simply ending the relationship would be appreciated. Furthermore, I am unsure of the best way to discuss this with him. I want to avoid overwhelming him with heavy topics as soon as he wakes up. How can I navigate between now and an appropriate time for a conversation? Summary: my partner experienced his first manic episode since we became a couple, which was frightening and unsettling. He has agreed to take medication, but I am seeking guidance on the best next steps to avoid similar situations in the future and to navigate our relationship more effectively moving forward. Story 3. I, 20M, and my girlfriend, 19F, have recently had some issues regarding her stress with school. How should we handle this situation? My girlfriend and I have been in a relationship for 2.5 years now. Throughout my life, I have always aspired to become a mathematics teacher. During my college years, I excelled academically, achieving straight A's in all of my general education and very challenging mathematics courses. My girlfriend has always dreamed of being a sonographer, and she is currently enrolled in a demanding program. This has resulted in her experiencing a lot of stress on a constant basis, and with her heavy workload, we spend less time together. I am okay with this, but I often felt that our conversations revolved mainly around her struggles with school, her stressful deadlines, and the sense of hopelessness she felt. Unfortunately, her childhood best friend passed away after battling cancer for a year while my girlfriend was 3 months into her program. A week later, my best friend's grandmother, who was practically another grandmother to my girlfriend, also died. Understandably, my girlfriend was devastated. I did everything I could to be her emotional support and to provide her with constant care. As a year passed, I continued to succeed in my studies, while she gradually worked her way through the grieving process. However, the main source of her difficulty remained school. At this point, school continued to be relentless, and I remained there to support her every day. My memory of the subsequent events is a bit unclear, but eventually, my own mental health began to decline. The ongoing challenges she faced seemed to take a toll on me. I frequently heard her recounting issues I had already heard before, and I felt powerless to help. I can't pinpoint when my feelings began to change. All I know is that I never expressed my feelings. I felt it was my duty to be both her support and to manage my own needs. I believed it was my responsibility to help her, and that failing to do so would make me a terrible boyfriend. As my second year of college began, the summer provided a much-needed respite for my girlfriend, and I was finally free from my own struggles since she was beginning to feel better. However, as soon as classes resumed, I thrived once again, while my girlfriend's mental health took a sharp downturn. This time, I found myself right back in the situation I had hoped to escape, only it felt considerably worse. I became severely depressed and contemplated taking my own life. Each day, my mind was flooded with distressing thoughts that had never troubled me before, but I felt unable to confide in her. She needed me, and I didn't want to be self-centered. Within the first 3 weeks of the new semester, I reached my breaking point. I used to love mathematics and enjoyed diving into all of the intricate concepts that few others appreciated. Now, I simply felt miserable. I started skipping my math classes, and if I did attend, I would leave early to cry in the restroom. I found myself wishing I were writing research papers, an activity I had always detested. Anything seemed better than sitting at a worn desk staring at numbers. I eventually discussed the possibility of dropping out with my mother. I felt I could no longer continue. While I still had a passion for teaching mathematics, the very idea of furthering my math education was the last thing I wanted. I resigned myself to giving up. When I confided in my mother about dropping out, she offered insincere encouragement, mixing expressions of love with reminders that I was meant to pursue a degree and that I was squandering an opportunity. My grandmother chastised me, claiming I was wasting my time and my life by not finishing school. She insisted that I could be the next Einstein if only I had the motivation to act. While I am competent in mathematics, I am far from being extraordinarily gifted. My girlfriend supported my decision to drop out, which I ultimately did. My mother did not fully support my choice until I mentioned that I still had a plan. I wanted to become an emergency medical technician. Although I was thrilled to embark on a new chapter in my life, I remained depressed and could not comprehend why. The intrusive thoughts lingered. I had stopped playing the guitar after dedicating 5 years to it, and I also gave up playing the drums and piano, 2 new hobbies I had previously poured my energy into perfecting. After a week of feeling despondent, I realized the root of my problem. It was my girlfriend. Her challenges were overwhelming me mentally and emotionally. However, I couldn't admit to her that she was the reason I had dropped out. I had a mental breakdown in front of her and shared my feelings of temptation and despair. I attributed my decision to leave school solely to my struggles with mathematics, which was the narrative I relayed to my family. This elicited greater support from everyone, except for my obstinate grandmother, whose opinion I had long ceased to value. I did manage to take one crucial step with my girlfriend, though. I informed her that her sharing of her struggles was causing me stress, nothing more and nothing less. I simply wanted her to reduce the frequency of these conversations. I still grappled with the belief that I was a bad boyfriend for not fully supporting her. I asked her only to discuss her concerns with me when I prompted her to do so, suggesting she reach out to her family if she truly needed someone to listen. The semester concluded, and I am now several months into EMT school, excelling in my classes. As winter break ended, my girlfriend was doing well mentally. Yet, as classes resumed, the cycle repeated itself. Because quite some time had passed, I felt prepared to manage her issues again. School became easier, providing me with the opportunity to focus on improving my mental state. My distressing thoughts vanished and have not returned to this day. Nevertheless, I soon discovered that I still struggled to cope with my girlfriend's problems. I asked her to refrain from discussing her challenges with me openly and to return to our previous dynamic. She was upset and felt that I was not supporting her in a mental and emotional capacity. I accepted that pain, but chose to adhere to my own preferences for how I wanted our relationship to be. I needed things to be a certain way. I did not want those negative thoughts to resurface. As of 2 months later, here we stand. She has questioned why she cannot share her concerns with me. Whenever I allow her to express her worries, she claims to feel misled and believes I only lend an ear when it is convenient for me. She explained that my attentiveness is profoundly beneficial to her when I do listen, yet I am seldom there for her. After hearing this, I could not bear the weight of guilt any longer. I shared the truth with her how my mental health deteriorated after I withdrew from school, how I left because I couldn't cope with my studies and her issues, and how my suicidal thoughts were triggered by what she shared with me. She broke down upon hearing the truth, realizing she had been unaware of my struggles, and I do not blame her for that. I failed to communicate my issues adequately. She remarked that had the roles been reversed, she would have considered breaking up, or at the very least, requesting a break. Overwhelmed with emotion, she stated she would no longer discuss her school-related concerns with me, as she was anxious about my mental health even though I have been fine for some time now. I believe she will overcome this hurdle and can return to sharing her experiences as long as I initiate the conversation. This brings me to my request for advice. How should we navigate our mental health struggles? I do not want her to suppress her issues to accommodate mine because that was the very problem I faced. I have suggested therapy for both her and us, but I am uncertain about the best course of action. Any advice on how to approach this situation would be greatly appreciated. We have no intention of splitting up over this, but I do not want my mental health to deteriorate for her sake, nor do I want hers to suffer for mine. Story 4. After my breakup, I found out my ex moved on quickly while I was left in the dark. Now I am left with gifts and memories from our relationship. Should I keep or toss them as I explore new connections? I do not have a partner at the moment, but I am contemplating whether I should keep items from my past relationship. Here is some context to help you provide an opinion. A little over a year ago, I was involved with a man who is 33 years old. We were together for nearly 2 years, and right before we were about to celebrate our 2-year milestone, during the Christmas week, he ended our relationship. He stated that he did not want to break up with me, but he no longer viewed me as his boyfriend. Instead, he saw me as his best friend. He expressed that he did not want to lose me because I was an important friend to him. I chose to remain friends with him and see how things would develop. That very week, he was already using Grindr, which is a hookup application. I am aware of this because I downloaded the app myself. However, my intention was only to socialize, go out, chat, enjoy a movie, visit an amusement park, or simply sit in a park and engage in conversation with someone. Since most of my friends were either traveling or busy with work until late at night, Grindr became my preferred option. I discovered his profile there, which explicitly indicated that he was seeking sex. His profile photo did not show his face, but I recognized his body, as he had sent me that exact photo only weeks earlier. I confronted him about it, questioning what our 2 years together meant if he was so quickly seeking sexual encounters with strangers. He offered some insincere excuses, and I told him that I needed time to decide whether I wanted to maintain our friendship, as it felt incredibly disrespectful for him to move on so soon. He admitted to being with 2 other men. This indicated that he had moved on from our relationship long before we broke up. Instead of honoring my one request at the start of our relationship to be honest if he ever stopped feeling anything for me, he did the complete opposite. After a week, I decided that I was willing to be friends. In reality, I did not genuinely want to be friends. Rather, my inner self was curious to understand why he was able to move on from our relationship so quickly. I wanted to grasp how long he had been feeling this way and what signs he had given. Several months passed after we resumed our friendship in January. He obtained a teaching position at a federal school in another part of the country and organized a farewell gathering. This is when everything began to make sense for me. I attended the event with a friend of his who lives nearby. We shared an Uber ride, and I actually enjoy talking with this friend as he is much more considerate compared to my ex. Upon arrival, we saw my ex drinking. Despite his claims that he did not drink, this was not only to me, but also to my friend, who was equally taken aback by his behavior. They have been friends for over 8 years. This was my first realization. Next, I learned, through a mutual friend from my ex's workplace, that they had been partying, clubbing, and binge drinking on numerous occasions over the past 2 years. I did what any sane person would do and asked incredulously, "Really? Did Jeff, a pseudonym, get that drunk? Which parties or clubs did you 2 go to?" My ex appeared extremely embarrassed, and I believe only the friend I shared the Uber with was aware that we had once dated. My ex's colleague mentioned more than he probably should have, and I relished being the sober one while others unintentionally revealed too much. My ex could not interrupt his friend, and they continued to share all the crazy things they did, while I took notes to look it all up later. Many of the events recounted took place during the last year of our relationship, and on various occasions when he canceled plans with me, claiming he was too tired or not emotionally stable. He had actually gone to clubs or parties. This same friend disclosed that another individual was in distress, begging my ex not to take the new job and urging him to find a role closer to where we lived. By April, my ex was already seeing someone else, and the level of involvement was significant enough to provoke such an emotional reaction. I was left in shock and felt deeply offended. Not only did many of these outings occur well before our first anniversary, but he was also involved with someone else at a deeper level. Naturally, I left as soon as possible with the friend I had shared the Uber with, who was just as astounded by all of this, given that my ex had described our relationship in a way that suggested he truly loved me and wanted to marry me. Suddenly, all of this information came to light. I sent a message to my ex, completely severing our ties, and I have not heard from him since. Now, to the main issue. I possess letters he wrote to me, a pure silver necklace he gifted me that is themed after my favorite gaming franchise, a shirt related to one of my favorite book and movie franchises, and a few physical copies of video games, 3 in total, plus 1 digital gift through Steam. Should I hold on to any of these physical items? The letters, video games, shirt, or necklace? I am fond of the shirt and necklace. However, I struggle to wear them, especially the necklace, which was also one of his favorite game franchises. It represents our relationship and the connection we had over the significance of that franchise. I could see myself discarding the letters, possibly selling the video games, or simply leaving them stored and waiting for them to appreciate in value since it is becoming increasingly difficult to find physical copies nowadays. As for the shirt, it looks great on me and is beautiful, but it occasionally reminds me of him, which frustrates me. The same goes for the necklace. I like it, and it is related to a character that is important to me. Yet, it too reminds me of him, which annoys me. For now, those items are safely tucked away, and I have not used them in over a month. It has been over a year, and I am beginning to get to know a new guy, who is 25 years old, and I am reconsidering whether to keep these items or eliminate them entirely.